My name is Renee Chapman, and I am 32 years old. If you saw me on the street 3 months ago, you wouldn't have looked twice. I was the woman in the gray blazer waiting for the light to change, the one checking emails on her phone in the grocery line, the one driving a 10-year-old Honda Civic that rattled every time it went over 40 miles an hour. I was invisible, reliable, and boring, and I liked it that way. Boring was safe. Boring was predictable. But 3 days after my family reunion, celebrating my father's 60th birthday, the safety I had spent my entire adult life building was incinerated. It didn't burn down in a fire. It wasn't washed away in a flood. It was stolen, digit by digit, by the people who were supposed to protect me. I remember the moment it happened, with a clarity that still makes my hands sweat. It was a Tuesday morning. I was sitting at my desk at DataSphere, the tech company in downtown Denver where I've worked as a data analyst for 6 years. The office was quiet, just the low hum of the air conditioning and the click-clack of keyboards. I was drinking coffee that I'd brought from home because buying Starbucks was a luxury I didn't allow myself. I opened my banking app, just a routine check I did every few days, a habit, a comfort. I tapped the icon. The little blue wheel spun, and then the numbers appeared. My savings account balance was $0, not a few $100s, not a mistake where a decimal point had moved, $0. The week before, that balance had been $403,127. It was 8 years of my life. It was every vacation I didn't take. It was every dress I didn't buy. It was the nights I stayed home eating pasta with butter while my friends went out for sushi. It was my dream home, my future, my security, gone, in an instant. My hands started to tremble. It started in my fingertips and moved up my arms until my whole body was vibrating. I stared at the screen, blinking, waiting for the numbers to correct themselves. It had to be a glitch. It had to be a display error. Banks don't just lose money. I called the bank immediately. I remember walking out to the stairwell because I couldn't breathe in the open office. The concrete walls were cold. I paced back and forth, listening to the hold music, a terrible, tinny jazz loop that seemed to mock the panic clawing at my throat. When the customer service representative finally answered, her voice was cheerful. Too cheerful. I gave her my information. My voice sounded strange, tight and high, like it belonged to someone else. I asked her where the money was. I asked her to fix the glitch. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. I heard her typing. Then she came back, and the cheerfulness was gone. She confirmed what I couldn't believe. She told me a transfer had been processed the previous day, the entire balance, wired out to an external account. I asked who authorized it. I hadn't authorized anything. I hadn't signed anything. I hadn't been to a branch in months. The representative cleared her throat. She said, "The transfer was authorized by Richard Chapman, the co-owner of the account." Richard Chapman, my father. The world stopped. I mean that literally. For a second, the hum of the building, the traffic outside, the beat of my own heart, it all just stopped. To understand why that moment broke me, you have to understand who my father was, or who I thought he was. I grew up in Denver, in what most people would call a comfortable middle-class existence. My father spent 32 years as a branch manager at a small regional bank. He was a pillar of the community. He was the guy who wore a suit to church. He was the treasurer of the Homeowners Association. He was the man who gave lectures at the dinner table about the importance of fiscal responsibility, about living within your means, about the sanctity of a good credit score. My mother, Linda, was the perfect banker's wife. She was a homemaker who believed her primary job was keeping the family image polished and pristine. She ironed sheets. She sent thank you notes for thank you notes. She believed that if you ignored a problem long enough, it would polite itself out of existence. From the time I could understand words, I understood one thing above all else: family comes first. It was stitched into every conversation. It was the subtext of every holiday speech. Family takes care of family. Those who have more share with those who have less. Blood is thicker than water. But in the Chapman house, family had a specific hierarchy. My younger brother, Derek, was 4 years behind me. And somewhere along the way, My parents decided he was the protagonist of our family movie, and I was part of the crew. Derek was the golden boy. He was charming, handsome, and utterly incapable of handling reality. He was the kind of kid who would break a neighbor's window and somehow talk the neighbor into apologizing to him. My mother would always say, "Derek has potential. He just needs the right opportunities. He just needs a little push." I learned early that my role was different. I wasn't the one with potential. I was the responsible one. I was the reliable one. I was the Camry of children. I got scholarships. I worked part-time jobs starting at 16. I never asked for help because I knew the answer would be a lecture on independence, whereas if Derek asked for help, the answer was a check. When I was 17, just before I left for college, my father took me to his bank branch. It was a rite of passage. He sat me down in the leather chair across from his big mahogany desk, the one with the gold nameplate that said, "Richard Chapman, branch manager." He looked at me with those serious, trustworthy gray eyes and said we were going to open my first adult accounts. He explained that he would add his name to the accounts as a joint owner, just in case, he said. His voice was calm, reassuring, the voice of a man who knew how the world worked. He said, "This way, if you're ever in an emergency, if you're stuck in a foreign country or in the hospital, I can access the funds to help you. I can manage things for you. It's a safety net, Renee." I never questioned it. Why would I? He was my father. He was a banker. He was the definition of safety. I signed the papers. I walked out of that bank feeling protected. For 15 years, I never removed him. I never even thought about it. Even as I graduated, got my first real job, got promoted, started making real money. His name sat there on the account profile, a ghost from my childhood. To remove him would have felt like an insult. It would have been saying, "I don't trust you," and in my family, implying a lack of trust was a sin worse than theft. Looking back, I can see how carefully the foundation was laid. Every "family first" lecture, every time I was praised for being the easy child, every subtle message that my needs were secondary to the family unit, it was all preparation. I was being groomed. I just didn't know what I was being prepared for. I kept receipts. That's an occupational hazard of being a data analyst. I find comfort in documentation. I like rows and columns. I like facts that can be verified. I have a spreadsheet on my personal laptop. It's password protected. It tracks every single dollar I have given my family over the last decade. In 2016, when I was 24 and had just landed my first senior role at DataSphere, my parents called. The roof on their house was leaking. Water was coming into the guest bedroom. They didn't have the liquidity to fix it, Dad said. His bonus hadn't come through yet. Could I help? Just a loan, of course. I transferred $15,000. They never mentioned it again. Dad got his bonus 3 months later and bought a new set of golf clubs. I never asked for the money back. Between 2017 and 2020, Derek's college tuition kept coming up short. He changed majors 3 times. Scholarships fell through because his grades slipped. Financial aid wasn't enough. Mom would call me, crying on the phone, saying Derek would have to drop out, that his future would be ruined, that he was finally finding his footing. I covered $28,000 in tuition gaps. Derek eventually dropped out anyway to pursue entrepreneurship. In 2019, Mom was diagnosed with severe rheumatoid arthritis. Insurance was fighting them on the new biological treatments. Dad said they were drowning in medical bills. He looked so tired, so beaten down. I paid $12,000 to the hospital directly. In 2021, Derek had a business opportunity, a real estate investment. He was going to flip a house with a friend. It was guaranteed to pay off. He showed me charts. He used words like equity and ROI. He just needed startup capital. He promised to pay me back within a year with interest. I loaned him $8,000. I never saw a cent of it. The deal went sour, the friend disappeared, and Derek needed support to get over the depression of the failure. Between 2022 and 2024, there were countless emergencies. Car repairs, unexpected tax bills, holiday expenses they couldn't quite cover because Dad wanted to keep up appearances for the extended family. Another $24,000, piece by piece. The total was over $87,000 in 10 years. I tracked every dollar. Not because I expected to be paid back. I knew better than that. I tracked it because I needed to know that I was good. I needed to see the evidence of my love. I needed to justify why I was still driving a clunker and living in a drafty apartment while my brother drove a leased Audi. But despite everything I gave away, I had a dream. A quiet, persistent dream that kept me going through every extra shift, every declined invitation, every time I talked myself out of buying something nice for myself. I wanted a house. I didn't want a mansion. I didn't want a showpiece to impress the neighbors. I just wanted a modest home in the suburbs of Denver. I wanted a backyard where I could plant a vegetable garden. I wanted a kitchen with enough light to grow herbs on the windowsill. I wanted a living room big enough to host a book club. Mostly, I wanted walls that belonged to me. I wanted a place where no landlord could raise the rent, where no one could tell me I couldn't paint the bedroom blue. I started saving seriously when I was 24. I set up automatic transfers. I created a separate high-yield savings account. I lived like a monk. I brought my lunch. I canceled my cable. I shopped at thrift stores. My goal was $150,000. That would be enough for a 20% down payment on a $750,000 house in a decent neighborhood in Denver. After 8 years of extreme discipline, sacrifice, and saying no to myself over and over again, I had $140,312.67. I was so close I could taste it. I spent my nights on Zillow, scrolling through listings, imagining my furniture in the empty rooms. I had already toured 3 houses. The third one was perfect. It was a craftsman-style home in Littleton. It had a wraparound porch. It had hardwood floors that needed refinishing. It had a backyard with an old oak tree. The asking price was $735,000. I planned to make an offer the week after Dad's birthday party. I was just waiting for one more paycheck to hit to cover the closing costs comfortably. That brings us back to the party. My father's 60th birthday was held on a Saturday in early June. It was a beautiful day. The sky was that piercing Colorado blue. My parents' backyard was set up with white rental tables. There were 20 guests, aunts, uncles, cousins, old family friends, neighbors who had known us for decades. The decorations were elegant. The food was catered. Trays of salmon, roast beef, expensive cheeses. I remember looking at the spread and wondering how they afforded it, knowing Dad had been complaining about inflation just weeks before. I later learned it was paid for with money Derek had borrowed from a payday lender. Everyone was dressed nicely. Everyone was smiling. We were performing the role of the happy, functional family for an audience. My father gave a speech about gratitude and legacy. He stood there in his polo shirt, holding a glass of champagne, talking about how proud he was of the life he'd built. My mother gazed at him adoringly, like he was a war hero returning home. Derek stood beside them. He was introduced to everyone as our up-and-coming real estate investor. No one mentioned that his last 3 investments had failed. No one mentioned that I had funded 2 of them. No one mentioned that he was currently sleeping on a friend's couch because he'd been evicted from his last apartment. I sat in the corner, nursing a glass of white wine, watching the performance. I felt like a spectator in my own life. Several relatives came up to me, asking the usual checklist of questions. When are you getting married? Still renting? No house yet? You really should buy. The market is only going up. I smiled and deflected. I didn't tell them I was days away from making an offer. I wanted it to be a surprise. I wanted to invite them to my housewarming and finally show them that I had built something too. But what I noticed, what I couldn't stop noticing that afternoon, was the way my father and Derek kept huddling together. They would stand near the grill, whispering intensely. They would glance at me, then look away quickly when I caught their eye. They looked conspiratorial, anxious. At one point, I walked past them to get a bottle of water, and they stopped talking mid-sentence. The silence was loud. Near the end of the party, my Aunt Helen pulled me aside. Helen is my father's older sister. She's 65, a retired schoolteacher, and the only member of my extended family who has ever acknowledged the imbalance in how my parents treat us. She's the black sheep because she speaks her mind. She squeezed my hand. Her skin was dry and cool. Renee, sweetheart, she said, her voice low. You've given enough. Be careful. I laughed it off, confused. Careful of what, Aunt Helen? She didn't answer immediately. She looked across the yard at my father, who was laughing too loudly at a joke Derek had made. She just looked at me with something I couldn't name. Pity, maybe, or forewarning. She just said, just keep your eyes open. Families get complicated when money gets tight. I didn't think much of it. I thought she was talking about the catering bill or maybe asking for another loan. I didn't think she meant they were going to cannibalize me. 3 days later, I understood. I was sitting in that stairwell at work, the phone pressed to my ear, the customer service representative's words bouncing around my skull. Authorized by the co-owner, Richard Chapman. My father hadn't just asked for money this time. He hadn't guilt-tripped me. He hadn't cried poverty. He had bypassed my consent entirely. He had walked into the vault of my future and emptied it. I hung up the phone with the bank and sat there for a long time. I was staring at a scuff mark on the concrete floor. I remember thinking about the grocery list I had written that morning. Eggs, spinach, almond milk. It seemed so absurd that I still had to buy eggs when my life had just ended. I needed to hear him say it. I needed to hear his voice. I couldn't process it as reality until he confirmed it. I walked to the parking garage. I sat in the driver's seat of my Honda. The car smelled like old coffee and vanilla air freshener. It was hot, the kind of stifling heat that builds up in a closed car in June. I didn't turn on the engine. I just sat there and dialed my father's number. He answered on the second ring. "Renee," he said, "I was expecting your call." There was no guilt in his voice, no hesitation, just a calm acknowledgement, like we were discussing a change in the weather or a rescheduled dentist appointment. "Dad," I said. My voice cracked. I hated that it cracked. I wanted to be furious, but I just sounded broken. The money, my savings, all of it. "Yes," he said. "I transferred it." "Why?" The word came out as a whisper. He sighed. It was the same sigh he used when I was a teenager and didn't understand a math problem. A sigh of patience, a sigh of superiority. Derek was in trouble, Renee. Real trouble. His investment property fell through. The financing collapsed at the last minute. He owed the hard money lenders $120,000. They were going to foreclose. They were threatening legal action. He would have had a judgment against him. His credit would have been destroyed. I had to help him. I felt like I was choking. "You had to help him? With my money?" "With family money," he corrected me. His tone was firm. "I put Derek's future first because he was in crisis. You are not in crisis, Renee. You have a stable job. You have a steady paycheck. You can absorb this." Derek couldn't. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. He was reframing the theft of my life savings as a noble act of parental protection. "Dad," I said, gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. "That was everything I had. That was 8 years of saving. I was going to buy a house next week. I had a house picked out." "And you still can," he interrupted. "You're smart. You're disciplined. You'll earn it back in no time. Another 5 or 6 years. What's 5 years in the grand scheme of things? Derek doesn't have your advantages. He needs support. He needs a foundation." I heard my mother's voice in the background, muffled but audible. "Tell her it's for the family, Richard. Tell her she needs to understand." My father's tone shifted, becoming the authoritative banker voice I'd known all my life. The voice that brokered deals and denied loans. "Renee, listen to me. I raised you for 18 years. I fed you. I clothed you. I paid for your education. This is what family does. We share. We sacrifice. I needed that money more than you did. Derek needed it more than you did. It is a redistribution of resources to ensure the survival of the unit." Something cold and clear settled in my chest. It wasn't sadness anymore. It was the absolute, crystalline realization that these people did not love me. They loved my utility. They loved what I could provide. To them, I wasn't a daughter. I was an asset. I was an insurance policy against their own poor decisions. "You forged my signature, Dad," I said. The line went silent. "I didn't approve that transfer," I continued. "The bank said it was authorized electronically, but I didn't do it. That means you logged in as me, or you created a digital signature pretending to be me." Silence. Then, "You're overreacting. As a joint owner, I have rights." "You have rights to access the account," I said. "You do not have the right to impersonate me to authorize a wire transfer that violates the daily limits. You had to override the security protocols." "I know how the bank works, Dad. You taught me." "Renee, don't use that tone with me." "I'm not using a tone," I said. "I'm stating facts. And here is another fact. I want that money back." He laughed, a short, dismissive bark of a laugh. "Or what? You'll ground me?" I took a deep breath. The air in the car was suffocating, but my mind was razor sharp. "Or I will go to the police." The silence that followed was different. It wasn't the silence of authority. It was the silence of shock. "You wouldn't," he whispered. "I would. I am giving you 24 hours, Dad. 1 day. If that money, $140,312.67, is not back in my account by tomorrow at 5 p.m., I am walking into the Denver Police Department and filing a report for bank fraud and identity theft." "Renee, you can't do that. It's a felony. You would send your own father to prison? Over money?" "You stole my life, Dad. You stole my future house. You stole 8 years of my labor. You didn't just borrow $20 from my wallet. You gutted me. And you gave it to Derek?" "I used part of it to pay down his debt," my father said, his voice hurrying now, stumbling. And the rest, we used as a down payment on a new apartment for him. A fresh start. He couldn't stay on that friend's couch. He needed a place that reflected his status." I closed my eyes. They had used my house money to buy Derek a house. The irony was so sharp it felt like a physical wound. "You bought him an apartment with my money?" "It's an investment, Renee. The market is booming. When he sells it in a few years, he'll pay you back. With interest. We kept track. We're not thieves." "You took it without asking. That makes you thieves." "We're your parents." 24 hours, Dad." I hung up. I threw the phone onto the passenger seat. I put my head on the steering wheel and screamed. I screamed until my throat was raw. I screamed for the little girl who tried so hard to be good. I screamed for the woman who ate leftovers for a week so she could put an extra $100 in savings. I screamed because I knew, deep down, that the money was gone. I sat there for another hour, watching the cars drive out of the garage, watching normal people go home to their normal lives. I wondered how many of them were being cannibalized by the people they loved. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in my living room with the lights off. My phone buzzed incessantly. 17 missed calls from Mom, texts from Derek saying, "You're being crazy. Call Dad back. Don't do this." I didn't answer. I was busy. I called Marcus Webb. Marcus and I had been friends since freshman year of college. We met in an economics class and bonded over our mutual hatred of early morning lectures. He was now a lawyer specializing in financial fraud cases at a mid-sized firm in Denver. When he answered, his voice was warm. "Renee, it's been months. What's going on?" I told him everything. I told him about the account, the transfer, the phone call, the fresh start for Derek. I tried to keep my voice steady, but I failed. By the end, I was crying quietly. There was a long pause on the line. "Renee," Marcus said, and his voice was completely different now, professional, deadly serious. "This is bad, but you need to know exactly what we are looking at here." "Tell me," I said. "Your father being a co-owner complicates things regarding the transfer itself. Technically, on paper, he has access. However, if he forged your signature, if he created a false electronic authorization to make it look like you initiated the transfer to bypass a dual approval limit or a security check, that is forgery. That is identity theft. And if he did it across state lines or using internet banking systems, it's wire fraud." My stomach dropped. "I don't want to send him to prison, Marcus. I just want my money back." "I understand," he said gently, "but you need leverage, and you need to move fast." Mountain West Federal has a window for disputing suspicious transactions. If you don't file a formal dispute within a few days, you might lose your right to recover the funds through the bank's insurance. He paused. You said there was an email confirmation? Yes. Does it show a digital signature? Yes, it has my name at the bottom, but I didn't type it. Forward it to me. And Renee, do you know anyone who does digital forensics? I did. Carla Diaz. She was a senior security specialist at my company. We had worked together on a few data integrity projects. She was brilliant, scary smart, and she owed me a favor for covering her shift last Christmas. I called Carla the next morning. I met her in the server room, away from prying eyes. I showed her the email. I gave her access to my banking logs. It took her less than an hour. She called me into her office and closed the door. She turned her monitor so I could see it. Renee, she said, her face grim, this signature wasn't generated from your phone. It wasn't generated from your laptop. The IP address traces back to a residential connection in Lakewood, my parents' house. And there's more, Carla said. Look at the timestamp. I looked. 3:47 a.m. on Monday morning. Were you awake at 3:47 a.m. on Monday? She asked. No, I was asleep. Then someone accessed your banking portal using your credentials, which means they stole your password, and created the signature while you were sleeping. This isn't just a joint owner moving money, Renee. This is a deliberate, calculated impersonation. They logged in as you to avoid triggering the alert that goes to the secondary owner. They tried to hide it from you. I looked at the screen. The evidence was right there in black and white pixels. My father hadn't just acted impulsively. He had planned this. He had stolen my password, waited until I was asleep, and logged in as me to rob me. This was the moment the last thread of attachment snapped. The family first motto, the guilt, the obligation, it all dissolved. I thanked Carla. I took the printout of the forensic report. I had given them 24 hours. They had 12 left. That Wednesday evening, I sat in my apartment. My laptop was open. On the screen was the spreadsheet of the $87,000 I had already given them. On the table was the forensic report proving my father was a criminal. My mother called. I finally picked up. Renee, thank God, she sobbed. Her voice was breathless, hysterical. Your father told me what you said. Sweetheart, you need to stop this. You're upset. We understand you're upset, but you can't threaten the police. Mom, I said, is the money back? Renee, please, listen to reason. The money is in the apartment now. We can't just pull it out. It's in escrow. It's done. Then you need to sell the apartment. You need to liquidate assets. I don't care how you do it. You would make your brother homeless? After everything we've done for you? You made me homeless, Mom, I screamed. That was my house. It was just money, Renee. It's just numbers on a screen. We are people. We are your blood. She was using every weapon in her arsenal. Guilt, shame, obligation. But she had forgotten one thing. She had raised a data analyst. She had raised a woman who found comfort in facts. And the fact was, they had stolen from me. I hung up on her. I watched the clock on my microwave. 4:58 p.m., 4:59 p.m., 5 p.m. I checked my account one last time. 0 balance. I closed my laptop. I stood up. I put on my coat. I grabbed the folder with the forensic report, the bank statements, and the spreadsheet. I walked out the door and drove to the police station. This wasn't a family dispute anymore. It was a crime scene. And I was the only witness willing to speak. What I didn't know then was that filing the report was just the beginning. I thought the police would handle it quietly. I thought maybe my dad would get a scare and pay me back. I didn't know that my brother was planning a housewarming party for the very apartment bought with my stolen money. I didn't know that I was about to be invited to celebrate my own destruction, and I certainly didn't know that I would be faced with a choice. Arrest my father quietly in the middle of the night, or let the entire world see exactly what kind of man he really was. But that is where the story truly begins. I walked into the Denver Police Department's District 1 station at 5:45 p.m. on a Wednesday. The waiting room smelled like floor wax and stale anxiety. There was a flickering fluorescent light overhead that buzzed with a low, headache-inducing hum. I sat on a hard plastic chair, clutching my folder of evidence to my chest like a shield. I had never been inside a police station before. In my world, the police were people you called when you had a fender bender or when a neighbor's party got too loud. They weren't people you asked to arrest your father. It took 40 minutes for someone to see me. When my name was finally called, I was led into a small, windowless interview room by Detective Sarah Mitchell. She was a woman in her 40s with sharp, tired eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. She didn't offer me coffee. She didn't offer me sympathy. She just pointed to the chair across from her metal desk and asked me what I was doing there. I laid it all out. I opened my folder. I placed the spreadsheet on the desk, then the bank statements, then the email with the forged signature, and finally, Carla's forensic report. I started talking, and once I started, I couldn't stop. I told her about the birthday party. I told her about the phone call. I told her about the Family First lectures that had brainwashed me for 3 decades. I told her about Derek's failures and my father's obsession with saving him. Detective Mitchell didn't interrupt. She just read the documents. She traced the lines on the bank statement with a pen cap. She scrutinized the IP address log. When I finished, the room was silent. The buzzing of the light seemed louder. "Miss Chapman," she said finally, looking up. "Based on what you've presented, this is a very clean case." "Clean?" I asked. She tapped the forensic report. "Usually, in family fraud cases, it's messy. It's he said, she said. The parents claim the child gave verbal permission. The child claims they didn't. It becomes a muddy civil dispute that we can't touch. But this?" She pointed to the timestamp. 3:47 a.m. "This is distinct. This is a digital fingerprint. If your father logged in using your credentials from a different IP address at an hour when you were verifiably asleep, and if he bypassed security protocols to generate a signature you didn't authorize, that removes the ambiguity. That is identity theft under Colorado Revised Statute 18-5-902. And because it involves a bank transfer of this size, we are also looking at bank fraud under federal statute." I felt a wave of nausea. Hearing the statute numbers made it real in a way that my anger hadn't. This wasn't just a family fight anymore. This was the law. "What happens now?" I asked. "We open an investigation," she said. "I'll coordinate with Mountain West Federal's fraud department. They will want to run their own internal check, but with this forensic report, it should be straightforward. Once we have their confirmation, we move to charges." She handed me a form. "This is your official identity theft report. Case number 2.24 DEN 78432. Do not lose this. You will need it to freeze your credit and dispute the transaction with the bank." I signed the paper. My hand was steady, which surprised me. "Miss Chapman," the detective said, her voice softening just a fraction, "I need to run your name through the national database. Standard procedure for financial crime victims, just to see if there is any other flagged activity linked to your Social Security number." I nodded. "Go ahead." She turned to her computer. I watched her type. I watched her squint at the screen. I saw her frown. She stopped typing. She clicked a mouse button. Then she clicked it again. "Miss Chapman," she said slowly, "are you aware of a personal loan taken out in your name through SoFi Lending?" I shook my head. "No, I don't have any loans. Just my credit card, which I pay off every month." She turned the monitor toward me. "There was a loan opened 6 months ago. The principal amount was $25,000. The status is currently 60 days past due." I stared at the screen. The date of the application was December 12th. I remembered that date. I was at a company retreat in Aspen. I wasn't even near a computer. The contact email listed on the loan application wasn't mine. It was renee.chapman.78@gmail.com. My actual email is renee.m.chapman. It was a fake address. And the disbursement account? Detective Mitchell clicked on the details. The funds were deposited into a checking account at Wells Fargo. "I don't have a Wells Fargo account," I whispered. "Let me guess," the detective said, her face hardening. "Does your brother bank at Wells Fargo?" I felt like I had been punched in the gut. Yes, he does." She sat back in her chair. "Then we aren't just looking at one count of theft. We are looking at a pattern. Your father, or your brother, or both of them working in tandem, didn't just empty your savings account this week. They have been using your identity to fund their lifestyle for at least 6 months, $25,000. I tried to do the math. That was around the time Derek suddenly had a new car, a leased BMW. He told us he had landed a consulting gig. He told us his luck was turning around. He had bought a BMW with a loan taken out in my name, using a fake email address, and he hadn't made the payments. My credit score. The score I had nurtured like a garden for 10 years. The score that was supposed to get me the best mortgage rate for my dream house. "It's probably tanked," Detective Mitchell said, reading my mind. "If they are 60 days past due, your score has likely dropped over 100 points." I put my head in my hands. I didn't cry. I was past crying. I was in a place beyond sadness. A cold, dark place where the only thing that existed was the burning need for justice. "Do it," I said into my hands. "Excuse me?" "Arrest him. Arrest them both. I don't care anymore." Detective Mitchell nodded. "We will be in touch." The walk back to my car was a blur. The city noises seemed muffled, distant. I felt like I was walking underwater. When I turned on my phone, the onslaught began. I had been in the station for 2 hours. In that time, my family had realized I wasn't bluffing about the deadline, and they had moved from defense to offense. There were 14 text messages from my mother. "How could you do this to us? You are destroying this family over money." From my cousin Rachel, "Heard about what you said to Uncle Richard. That is cold, Renee. He's your father." From my Aunt Patricia, "Your mother is devastated. She can't stop crying. I hope you're happy." From Derek, "You're dead to me. Don't ever talk to me again." They were closing ranks. My father had obviously spun the narrative. He had gotten to them first. He had painted me as the hysterical, ungrateful daughter attacking her aging parents over a misunderstanding. He hadn't told them he forged my signature. He hadn't told them about the secret loan. He had weaponized the family gossip network against me. I drove home in silence. I didn't reply to any of them. I blocked my Aunt Patricia. I blocked Rachel. I put my phone on Do Not Disturb and left it in the kitchen. That night, I sat on my floor and pulled my credit reports. Detective Mitchell was right. My score, which had been a pristine 790, was now 640. The SoFi loan was there, staring at me like a malignant tumor. 60 days late. Serious delinquency. I printed the report. I added it to the folder. The next 3 days were a masterclass in psychological warfare. My mother left voicemails that swung wildly between begging and screaming. She offered to set up a payment plan, $50 a month. At that rate, they would pay me back in 230 years. When I didn't accept, she called me heartless. She said I was possessed. She said I had lost my way. My father sent one email. It was short. "We can fix this internally. Don't involve outsiders. You will regret making this public." It was a threat. But it was the threat of a man who knew he was losing control. Then came Saturday. It was exactly 1 week after the birthday party. I was sitting on my couch, drinking tea, trying to summon the energy to clean my apartment. I opened Facebook. I don't know why. Maybe I was looking for pain. And I found it. There was a notification. Derek Chapman created an event, New Beginnings Housewarming. I clicked on it. My breath hitched. The event page header was a photo of a gleaming apartment, floor-to-ceiling windows, hardwood floors, a view of the Denver skyline that probably added $50,000 to the price tag. The caption read, "Come celebrate my new place in the Highlands, Saturday, June 15th, 6 p.m. Can't wait to show you all what hard work and smart investing can achieve." Hard work. Smart investing. I stared at those words until they blurred. I clicked on the guest list. 45 people had RSVP'd going. My parents were listed as co-hosts. Derek's college friends were there. My cousins were there. Even the neighbors from my parents' street were invited. I was not invited. I looked up the address listed on the event page. It was a trendy complex in the Highlands, one of the most expensive neighborhoods in the city. I found the listing on Zillow. It had sold 2 weeks ago. Sold for $410,000. The down payment for a place like that, especially for someone with Derek's credit history, would have been at least 20%. $80,000. I did the math. My father had transferred $140,000. He used $80,000 for the apartment. He probably used the rest to pay off the hard money lenders he mentioned. My savings account wasn't just gone. It had been transmuted into this apartment. My sacrifice had become Derek's success. And now they were going to throw a party in it. They were going to stand in that living room, drink champagne, and toast to Derek's bright future, while standing on the floorboards paid for by my stolen past. I felt a kind of rage I didn't know existed. It wasn't hot and fiery. It was cold. It was absolute. I scrolled through the comments on the event page. "Congratulations, Derek. So proud of you. Looks amazing, man. You deserve it. Can't wait to see the crib." And then I saw one comment that stood out. It was from Aunt Helen. "Lovely apartment, Derek. Where did you find the money for such a nice down payment?" There were no replies to her comment, but 20 minutes later, when I refreshed the page, her comment had been deleted. My phone rang. It was Aunt Helen. I picked up. "Aunt Helen?" "Renee," she said. Her voice was tight. "Did you see it?" "I saw it. I'm so sorry, honey. The sheer gall of it. He says it's from Smart Investing," I said, my voice deadpan. "Smart Investing," she scoffed. "Your father called me yesterday. He's making the rounds, Renee. He's calling everyone in the family." "What is he saying?" "He's telling people you've had a nervous breakdown." I gripped the phone. "A breakdown?" "He's telling everyone that the stress of your job finally got to you, that you're making up wild accusations. He said you're confused, that you agreed to lend Derek money and now you've forgotten or changed your mind because you're unstable. He's trying to discredit you before you can open your mouth. He wants to make sure that if you do talk, no one believes you." I walked to the window. I looked out at the parking lot. "So that's the play," I said softly. "Gaslighting on a family-wide scale." "He's scared," Helen said. "He knows what he did, and he's trying to build a wall of people around him so you can't get to him." "Is he going to the party?" "Oh, yes. He and Linda are holding court. It's his victory lap. He saved his son. He's the hero." I closed my eyes. I imagined them there. The champagne, the toasts, my father's hand on Derek's shoulder, the smiles, the lies. "Helen," I said, "are you going?" "I wasn't planning to," she said. "I can't stand to look at them right now." "I need you to go," I said. Silence. Then, "Why?" "Because I need someone inside. I need someone to confirm he's there." "Renee, what are you planning?" "I'm planning to attend," I said, in my own way. Monday morning came, 5 days after I filed the police report. I received a call from a number I didn't recognize. "Miss Chapman, this is Daniel Torres from the Fraud Resolution Department at Mountain West Federal." I sat up straight in my office chair. "Yes, Mr. Torres." "I'm calling regarding case number FRD 2024-067891. We have completed our preliminary investigation into the disputed transaction." I held my breath. This was it. If the bank sided with my father, if they said the joint account status made it legal, I was dead in the water. Mr. Torres continued. "Our internal security review, combined with the forensic data provided by Detective Mitchell's office, has confirmed that the credentials used to authorize the transfer were compromised. The geolocation data and device fingerprint do not match your established profile. Furthermore, the electronic signature does not match your biometric typing patterns we have on file. I exhaled, a long, shaky sound. So you believe me? We have determined that the transaction was unauthorized and fraudulent, he said. We have frozen the receiving accounts, although the funds have already been largely depleted. We are cooperating fully with the Denver Police Department. What about my money? I asked. Once the police report is finalized and the fraud claim is processed through our insurance carrier, we will begin the restitution process. You should see the funds returned to your account within 30 to 60 days. Thank you, I whispered. Thank you.
One more thing, Miss Chapman. Mr. Torres paused. His professional demeanor slipped just a little. I've been doing this for 12 years. Family fraud it's the hardest kind. I just want to say I'm sorry you're going through this. I thanked him again and hung up. I immediately called Detective Mitchell. Detective, I said, the bank confirmed the fraud. I know, she said. I just got off the phone with them, and I have the subpoena results for the SoFi loan. The IP address matches your parents' house for that one too. We have them, Renee. Dead to rights. What happens next? Next, we get a warrant signed by a judge. That should happen tomorrow. Then we make an arrest. I was silent for a moment. Miss Chapman? Detective Mitchell asked. Do you have a preference on how we handle this? Usually, for white-collar crimes with low flight risk, we can arrange for them to turn themselves in. Or we can pick them up at their residence. I thought about the nervous breakdown story. I thought about the texts calling me crazy. I thought about the housewarming party. I thought about the 45 people who were going to be standing in that apartment, celebrating a lie. If I let him surrender quietly, he would control the narrative. He would tell everyone it was a misunderstanding, a banking error, a witch hunt. He would play the victim. He would tell them I was sick. And because he was Richard Chapman, the respectable banker, and I was just his quiet, single daughter, they would believe him. They needed to see the truth. They needed to see it in a way they couldn't ignore. Detective, I said, I have a suggestion regarding the timing of the arrest. I'm listening. Saturday, June 15th, 7 p.m. Saturday? Mitchell asked. Why Saturday night? Because, I said, my voice steady and cold, that is when Richard and Derek Chapman will be at 2847 Highland Boulevard, apartment 4C. There's a party? Yes, a housewarming party for the apartment purchased with the stolen funds. Detective Mitchell was silent for a long beat. You want us to arrest them at a party? She asked. I want you to arrest them where the evidence is. The apartment is the evidence, and everyone who is anyone in my family will be there. Miss Chapman, that is unconventional. It could be volatile. You asked me if I was prepared for what this means, I said. I am. He stole my future. He slandered my name. He gaslit my entire family. I don't want a quiet arrest. I want the truth to be public. I heard the scratch of her pen on paper. Okay, she said. I can't promise 7 p.m. exactly, but I can promise we will execute the warrant at that location on Saturday evening. Thank you, Detective. I hung up the phone. My heart was pounding, but it wasn't fear anymore. It was the drumbeat of war. I called Aunt Helen back. Helen, I said, I need you to go to that party. You changed your mind? No, but something is going to happen, and I need you to be there to open the door. Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, the days crawled by. I went to work, I sat in meetings, I nodded at spreadsheets. I felt like a spy living a double life. On the surface, I was Renee the data analyst. Underneath, I was counting down the hours until the demolition of my family. The guilt tried to creep in, of course. It always does. Late at night, lying in bed, I would hear my father's voice teaching me how to drive. I would remember my mother making me chicken soup when I had the flu. Am I a monster? I asked myself. Am I really going to do this? But then I would look at the SoFi loan statement. I would look at the zero balance. I would remember the nervous breakdown lie. They had killed the daughter who loved them. They had replaced her with a victim. And now, the victim was fighting back. Saturday arrived. I spent the day in my apartment. I didn't go out. I showered. I dressed in comfortable clothes. I wasn't going to the party. I couldn't be there.
If I was there, it would look like a scene I had caused. It would look like a family fight. This needed to be the law coming for them, not me. At 6 p.m., my phone buzzed, a text from Aunt Helen. "I'm here. It's nauseating. The apartment is huge. Derek is acting like he's Elon Musk." 6:30 p.m. "Your father is giving a speech, talking about investing in the future. People are eating it up." 6:45 p.m. "Your mother just asked me why you aren't here. She told Aunt Patricia you're having an episode and couldn't handle the social pressure." I stared at the phone. An episode. I typed back, "Hold tight, almost time." I sat on my couch, staring at the clock on the wall. The second hand ticked. Tick, tick, tick. I imagined the scene, the music, the laughter, the view of the city, the arrogance of it all. At 6:58 p.m., I got one more text from Aunt Helen.
"I'm going to ask him, loudly." "Ask him what?" "Where the money came from." I smiled. Aunt Helen was going off script, and I loved her for it. 7 p.m., I closed my eyes. Somewhere across the city, in a luxury apartment in the Highlands, the doorbell was about to ring, and everything was about to change. The clock on my wall hit 7 p.m. I was sitting in my apartment, 4 miles away from the party, but I felt the impact in my bones. I didn't get a play-by-play in real time. I didn't need one. I knew exactly what was happening because I had set the stage. But later, Aunt Helen filled in every gap, every silence, every look. I have replayed her descriptions so many times in my head that it feels like a memory I lived myself. At 6:58 p.m., the party was at its peak. The sun was setting over the Rockies, casting this golden, expensive glow over Derek's living room. My father was holding court near the kitchen island, a glass of scotch in his hand, telling my Uncle Thomas about the wisdom of leveraging assets. My mother was circulating with a tray of prosciutto-wrapped figs, beaming like she had personally invented success. Derek was standing by the floor-to-ceiling windows, accepting a high five from a college buddy who had previously ghosted him. He looked like he had won. He looked untouchable. Then Aunt Helen made her move. She didn't shout. She didn't make a scene. She just walked up to the group surrounding my father and Derek, and she asked a question in a voice that was perfectly calibrated to cut through the chatter. "Richard," she said, "I'm curious. Since Derek's credit was shot 6 months ago, and you've been complaining about your retirement accounts shrinking, where exactly did the $80,000 for this down payment come from?" The conversation in the immediate circle died. My father turned to her, his smile tight. "Now isn't the time for financial audits, Helen. We're celebrating." "I'm just asking," she pressed, louder this time. "Did it come from the same place as the $25,000 loan taken out in Renee's name? Or did it come from her savings account, the one she called me about crying on Tuesday?" The room went dead silent. The music seemed to stop, though it was probably still playing. 45 people, neighbors, cousins, friends, turned to look. "You're drunk, Helen," my father snapped, his face flushing red. "Derek, get your aunt some water." "I'm stone-cold sober, Richard, and I think—" The doorbell rang. It was a sharp, electronic chime that echoed off the hardwood floors. My father froze. He looked at the door, and for the first time in his life, the mask slipped. He looked terrified. Derek laughed nervously. "Probably the pizza. I ordered extra for later." He walked to the door. He opened it with a flourish, expecting a delivery driver. Instead, he found 2 uniformed officers and Detective Mitchell. "Richard Chapman?" Detective Mitchell's voice carried into the living room. "We have a warrant for your arrest." The glass of scotch slipped from my father's hand. It shattered on the floor, splashing amber liquid onto the brand new rug. "This is a mistake!" my mother screamed, rushing forward. "This is a private party! You can't just barge in here!" "Ma'am, step back," the officer said firmly. They walked into the apartment. They didn't look at the view. They didn't look at the balloons. They walked straight to my father. "Richard Chapman, you are under arrest for bank fraud, identity theft, and forgery under Colorado and federal statutes. You have the right to remain silent."
The clicking of the handcuffs was the loudest sound in the world. My father, the banker, the pillar of the community, was marched out of the luxury apartment with his hands cuffed behind his back, past the neighbors he had tried to impress, past the family he had lied to. As they reached the door, he looked back. He didn't look at my mother. He looked for someone else. Maybe he was looking for me, to beg, to threaten, to guilt trip, but I wasn't there. Derek stood by the open door, his mouth hanging open, his face the color of ash. Detective Mitchell stopped in front of him. "You might want to call a lawyer too, son," she said quietly. "We're looking into the loan documents next." And then they were gone. The silence they left behind was heavy, suffocating, and then the murmurs started. "He stole it?" someone whispered. "From his daughter? The apartment, it's stolen money?" People didn't finish their drinks. They didn't say goodbye. They just put their glasses down on the nearest surface and walked out. They fled the scene of the crime. I arrived 45 minutes later. I walked into the building, took the elevator to the 4th floor, and found the door to apartment 4C wide open. The party was over. The apartment was a wreckage of abandoned celebration. Half-eaten appetizers sat on the tables. Congratulations balloons bobbed aimlessly against the ceiling, mocking the devastation below. There were only 5 people left: my mother, Derek, Aunt Helen, Uncle Thomas, and me. My mother was sitting on the designer sofa, sobbing. Not the quiet weeping of sadness, but the hysterical, gasping sobs of a woman whose reality had just been shattered. Derek was standing by the window, staring out at the city, looking like a child who had broken a vase. When I walked in, my mother's head snapped up. Her mascara was running down her face in black streaks. "You," she hissed. "You did this." I stood in the entryway, clutching my folder. "I didn't do this, Mom. Dad did this." "You called the police!" she screamed, standing up. "On your own father, at a party. You humiliated us. You destroyed him." "He destroyed himself," I said calmly. "He stole $140,000 from me. He forged my signature. He stole my identity. Those are crimes, Mom, not mistakes. Crimes." "It was family money," she shrieked. "It was all going to come back to you eventually." "No," Uncle Thomas said. We all turned. Uncle Thomas was standing near the kitchen. He looked older than I had ever seen him. He looked gray. "I asked him," Thomas said, his voice shaking. "Last week, when he told me about the apartment, I asked him how Derek could afford it. He looked me in the eye and told me Derek had made a killing in crypto. He lied to my face." Thomas looked at me. "Renee, I had no idea. I thought you were—" "He told us you were having a breakdown." "I know," I said softly. "I brought the proof." I walked over to the kitchen island and opened my folder. I laid out the forensic report. I laid out the bank statements showing the unauthorized transfer. I laid out the SoFi loan documents showing the $25,000 taken in my name for Derek's car. "Read it," I said to Derek. He wouldn't turn around. "Read it, Derek!" I yelled, and my voice cracked with the weight of 10 years of silence. He turned slowly. He looked at the papers. He saw the dates. He saw the amounts. "Dad said you knew," he whispered. "He said you wanted to help. He said we were just borrowing it." "You knew I was saving for a house," I said. "You knew. And you let him take it. You let him buy you this place. And you threw a party in it." "I didn't know he forged your signature," Derek stammered. "I just thought—" "You thought what? That I just decided to gift you my entire life savings? That I decided to stay in my rental so you could live in a luxury condo?" I looked him in the eye. "You didn't think, Derek. You just took. Because that's what you've always done." I turned to my mother. She was reading the forensic report. Her hands were shaking so hard the paper was rattling. "He logged in at 3:47 a.m., she whispered. "He was in bed with me. He got up. He said he needed water." She looked up at me, and for a second, I saw the realization hit her. She knew. Deep down, she had always known who he was. She had just chosen not to see it. "I'm leaving now," I said. I just wanted you to know the truth, the real truth, not the version Dad invented." "Renee," my mother pleaded, taking a step toward me. "Please, we can fix this. You can drop the charges. Tell them it was a misunderstanding. If he goes to prison—" "I can't drop the charges, Mom. The bank has already filed. The district attorney has picked it up. It's out of my hands." "But you're his daughter." "I am," I said, "and that's why this hurts so much." I walked out. Aunt Helen followed me. We took the elevator down in silence. When we got to the lobby, she pulled me into a hug that felt like it was holding my pieces together. "I am so proud of you," she whispered into my hair. The next 3 months were a blur of legal proceedings. I didn't have to see my father in court. Detective Mitchell and the district attorney handled everything. The evidence was overwhelming. The forensic report was bulletproof. They charged him with 3 counts: bank fraud, identity theft, and forgery. The federal charges carried a potential sentence of up to 30 years, though everyone knew he wouldn't get that. Marcus, my lawyer friend, kept me updated. "He's going to plead," Marcus told me over the phone in July. "His lawyer knows they can't beat the digital evidence. They're negotiating a deal." The deal was finalized in August. Because of his age, his lack of prior criminal record, and the fact that it was a family matter, the judge went lenient on the prison time. He pled guilty. He was sentenced to 18 months of probation, 200 hours of community service, and, most importantly, full restitution. The court order required him to liquidate his assets to pay me back immediately. He had to cash out a chunk of his 401k. He had to pay the penalties. One Tuesday in late August, I opened my banking app. There it was. $140,312.67, plus the $25,000 to clear the SoFi loan. The numbers were back, but they felt different now. They felt heavier. I had earned that money twice, once by working for it, and once by fighting for it. I transferred every penny to a new bank. I closed my accounts at Mountain West Federal. When the teller asked me why I was leaving after 15 years, I just said, "Security concerns." The social consequences for my family were far more brutal than the legal ones. Derek had to sell the apartment. The New Beginnings condo was on the market for less than 3 months. Because it was a forced sale to cover the legal fees and the loan fallout, he took a loss. He moved back into my parents' basement. His reputation in the Denver real estate scene, which was already shaky, was incinerated. You can't be a savvy investor when everyone knows your seed capital was stolen from your sister. My mother retreated into isolation. She stopped going to church. She stopped hosting book club. The shame was too much. In her world, appearance was everything, and the picture had been smashed. Uncle Thomas and the rest of the extended family cut them off. It wasn't just the theft, it was the lies. The nervous breakdown story had backfired spectacularly. When people realized I was sane and my father was a criminal, the betrayal felt personal to them too. I didn't speak to my parents for 2 months. Then, in October, I got a letter. It was handwritten, on my mother's stationery. I sat at my kitchen table and opened it, bracing myself. "Dear Renee," it began, "your father and I have been doing a lot of praying. We want you to know that we forgive you for the way you handled things." I stopped reading. I had to put the letter down and walk a lap around my kitchen. "We forgive you." Not, "We are sorry." Not, "We were wrong." "We forgive you." I picked it up again. "We know you felt hurt, but you must understand that everything we did was for the family. Your father has always been a provider. He made a hard choice in a difficult time. The Bible says that anger is a poison. We hope you can find it in your heart to let go of this bitterness and come home. We are still your parents." I tore the letter in half, then I tore it into quarters, then I dropped it in the trash. It was the final confirmation I needed. They hadn't learned. They hadn't changed. To them, I was still the villain because I had refused to be the victim. I didn't reply. A week later, Derek reached out. He sent an email asking to meet for coffee. The subject line was just, "Please." I debated it. Part of me wanted to ignore him, but part of me needed to see if he was any different from them. We met at a Starbucks downtown. He looked terrible. He had gained weight. His clothes were rumpled. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a sullen defeat.
"Thanks for coming," he said, staring at his cup.
"What do you want, Derek?" I wanted to say I'm sorry." "Okay," I said. "You're sorry." "I am. I really am. It's been a nightmare. I can't get a loan. My friends won't talk to me. Mom and Dad are fighting all the time." He looked up at me, and I saw the old Derek flicker behind his eyes, the Derek who needed a fix. "Renee," he said, "Dad's probation. The fees are killing him, and with the restitution payment, they're really tight. I was wondering, since you got the money back, if you could maybe help with the legal costs? Just a loan. I promise I'll pay you back." I stared at him. I stared at him for a full minute. It was breathtaking, really. The audacity, the absolute impenetrable delusion. "You want me to pay for the lawyer Dad used to defend himself against stealing from me?" "He's your father, Renee. He's 60 years old. He's working at a hardware store because no bank will hire him."
I stood up. I picked up my purse. "Goodbye, Derek," I said.
"Renee, wait. Don't be like this." "I'm not being like anything," I said. "I'm being free." I walked out of that coffee shop and I never looked back. November came. The leaves turned gold and fell. The air got crisp. I spent Thanksgiving with Aunt Helen. She invited me to her small house in Berkeley. It was cozy, filled with books and plants. We ate turkey and drank too much wine. Over dessert, she told me something I hadn't known. "You know," she said, tracing the rim of her glass, "my mother, your grandmother, did the same thing to me when I was 25. I looked up, shocked. "What?" "She opened a credit card in my name, ran up $10,000. In 1980, that was a fortune. I found out when I tried to buy a car." "What did you do?" I asked.
"Nothing," Helen said softly.
"I paid it off. I was too scared to tell anyone. I spent 5 years paying for her fur coats and trips to Vegas. I never confronted her. I just swallowed it." She reached across the table and took my hand. "Watching you, Renee, watching you stand up in that apartment, it healed something in me. You did what I couldn't do. You broke the cycle." I squeezed her hand. "I didn't feel brave, Aunt Helen. I felt like I was dying." "That's what bravery is," she said. "It's doing the right thing even when it feels like you're dying." December. 6 months after the worst day of my life, I sat in a conference room at a title company. The house wasn't the Craftsman in the city. That one had sold while I was fighting my legal battles. But the one I found was better. It was a split level in Littleton. It had a big backyard that backed up to a creek. It needed some work. The kitchen was outdated and the carpet was ugly, but the bones were good.
The price was $735,000. I signed the papers. My hand didn't shake this time. I handed over the check for the down payment. $147,000. My recovered savings, plus 6 months of aggressive saving while I waited for the dust to settle. When the title agent handed me the keys, she smiled. "Congratulations, Miss Chapman. It's all yours." Mine. Not mine and my father's. Mine. I drove to the house that evening. It was snowing lightly, big fat flakes that muffled the sound of the world. The house was empty. I hadn't moved my furniture in yet. I walked through the rooms. I listened to the echo of my boots on the floor. I stood in the kitchen and imagined painting the cabinets sage green. I stood in the living room and imagined a Christmas tree in the corner. I went out to the backyard. The cold air filled my lungs. It smelled like pine and snow and silence. I thought about my father, serving probation, angry and bitter. I thought about my mother, waiting for an apology I would never give. I thought about Derek, still looking for a shortcut. I miss the idea of them. I miss the family I thought I had, but I didn't miss the reality. I had lost my safety net, yes, but I had built a foundation. I pulled my phone out and took a picture of the snowy yard. I sent it to Aunt Helen. "Home," I typed. She replied instantly with a heart emoji. I put the phone away. I stood there in the dark, in the cold, completely alone, and for the first time in 32 years, I didn't feel lonely. I felt solid. I felt real. I chose myself, and it was the best investment I ever made.